I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Silly Jedi! Silly Jedi!
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
Okay, hey everybody, welcome to Jedi Toy Masters Star Wars Car Talk. And wow, what a few weeks it has been. You know, after the Rise of Skywalker, it was Rise of Skywalker fever everywhere, and kind of, it was weird. It was like this backlash about, you know, people loved the movie, people were indifferent towards the movie, and then eventually there were some that, there were, you know, many that came out and began to speak ill of the movie. I think overall, you know, now you've heard our previous episodes, and if you haven't, please check them out. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can check out the playlist, or if you're watching them on, listening to them wherever you listen to your podcast, hopefully on Anchor, because they're awesome. But Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, just make sure you subscribe and make sure you check out some of the other previous week's episodes, because we tackled the topic of the Rise of Skywalker. You know, there was so much expectation and there was so much anticipation, and because of that, I think there was a lot of you know, not regret, but I feel there was a letdown. There was a little bit of a letdown, and you know, our anticipations were so high. I mean, a lot of people went into this movie with their expectations really low, and they enjoyed the movie. I fall into that camp where I tried my hardest not to want too much from this movie. And the reason I was able to do that is because you know, I just was not able to really get into this trilogy. This sequel trilogy to me, you know, was overall disappointing. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, let me just say that. And I love Star Wars, and anything Star Wars is great. I mean, Clone Wars, sign me up. Star Wars Rebels animated show, sign me up. Star Wars Resistance, you know, I don't understand it that well. It's kind of kiddie and whatever, and it tackles it takes place in the sequel trilogy era. But you know what? I'll watch it. I'll enjoy it. The Mandalorian, heck yes, give me some of that Yoda baby. But now this sequel trilogy, you know, I think here's the thing. Watching them for the first time, each of these films, you watch them with anticipation and love for Star Wars and gratitude that there is something new that's Star Wars related out there on the big screen, and the continuing episodes of this beloved film saga. But now having watched all three and having it now be in the rearview mirror, this sequel trilogy was just disappointing to me. It really didn't do much. You know, it kind of created a problem that didn't need to be created in order to solve it, but it solved it in a way where it's like, but we didn't really care about the problem to begin with, so the fact that you're solving it doesn't really mean much to me. You know, I think it's great that we got a character like Rey, that we got a strong female character, although I think we already had that in Princess Leia. I'm glad to see that they kind of went outside the box and created a character of Finn that was like a stormtrooper that turns into a good guy, and maybe he's force sensitive. Like, that was fascinating to me, but they never did anything with that. They kind of set that up in The Force Awakens and then didn't do anything with that. You have Poe, who is kind of like a cross between like Luke and Han. You know, he's like the cocky pilot, but he's gun-ho rebel, you know. But at times his character was a little bit too over the top and it was too much. It was like, listen, you're just kind of like Mr. Cool Guy, and you didn't earn it. Like, Han Solo was cool from the get-go. We established that right from the moment we saw him. And when we see him take a heroic turn at the end of A New Hope, it basically set up that character for the rest of the series, where anything he did, we were following his character. We were tracking with him. You know, Poe, he disappears for like the first part of Force Awakens. He pops back in. He disappears again. Then he pops back at the end. In the middle one, Last Jedi, he didn't really do much. You know, it was like all about him, like trying to. It was like mutiny in the Resistance, and then they stopped calling it the Resistance, and then it became the Rebellion again, and then in Rise of Skywalker, we're back to square one, where it's like, oh, it's the rebels, and they're this like ragtag group that's trying to overthrow or try to defeat the Empire, but it's not the Empire, it's the First Order, but now it's the Final Order, but it's really the Empire because Palpatine was behind it, and it is such a convoluted mess, this trilogy, that this is how bad it is. It's so bad that The Last Jedi now that the dust is settling, The Last Jedi, which was the film that everyone criticized and that was so divisive, you know, criticized it, whether it was good or bad. You know, you nitpicked it and you defended it, or you nitpicked it because you hated it. But now it's proven to be the most character-driven and the most Star Wars of this trilogy. And why do I say that? Because, you know, Force Awakens was basically a throwback movie. George Lucas said it himself. It's a throwback movie. It's kind of just feeding off nostalgia and counting on nostalgia as the selling point. And The Rise of Skywalker did the exact same thing. It was Return of the Jedi all over again, with little bits of Empire Strikes Back sprinkled in, and then a little tiny taste of the prequel, kind of like Revenge of the Sith-esque threat. And you know, there was nothing that was brought to the table that we can really sink our teeth into. Everything was just, it was just like a little tiny appetizer after little tiny appetizer, but there was no meal. There was no meal. It was not a feast. It was the cheapest of cocktail parties with just these little tiny hors d'oeuvres going around, and you just keep thinking to yourself, where's the beef? Where's the meat? Where is it? You know, this trilogy was all about fluff. And again, it pains me to say this because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars. I think Star Wars is great. I grew up on it. You know, the more I think about it, the more I feel like what I got from those movies really inspired me, not just like inspired me because it was like such a cool fantasy movie or because of all the messages of good and evil, but just like it inspired me to be a creative person. And this sequel trilogy, it's just, you know, it's like it's kind of crushing because it's kind of like it's a corporate trilogy. It's as much as you can gripe about the prequels, that the prequels have their problems, but at the end of the day, the prequels were a vision of a creator, George Lucas, an independent creator. I mean, the prequels, for all intents and purposes, was a high-budget indie film series. You know, George Lucas said, these are the movies I'm going to make. Love them or hate them, this is what they are. This is my vision. This is what I'm doing. You know, and he was the sole visionary behind it. You know, granted, he got input from other people, blah blah blah, and maybe he should have had a little less yes men and a little bit more guys that would challenge his creative views and kind of challenged him to kind of be, you know, to do things a little bit different, and maybe that would have helped the prequels, especially like the writing and the dialogue and just kind of just overall like certain things that, you know, didn't need to be so CGI'd and you know, so cartoony in a way that you know, but at the end of the day, the prequels were a vision of a sole creator who was trying to tell a story, and you know, good or bad, it is what it is. At the end of the day, they were entertaining nonetheless. The sequel trilogy, however, is a modge-podge of input from people that have no place talking about where the Star Wars stories should go. You know, there are so many. There's so much rich history in expanded universe content that they could have pulled from, and Disney foolishly chose to. They chose to basically close the book on all that and call it legends and say, well, it's not real, it's just legends. And yet, these are stories that George Lucas approved of, and I'm sure if George Lucas would have done his sequel trilogy, he would have honored a lot of the stuff that had been written, and that's why I think he was going to go in a different direction, and he was going to, you know, tackle more the topic of the Force, and you know, just kind of like I think he was going to go into the whole world between worlds and the cosmic nature of the Force, and he was going to get real deep with the Force, and it was going to be very much like about the Force, about Jedi, less about the war and more about the star, you know. And that would have been great to tie, you know, the first trilogy was all about the corruption of good and evil, and you know, falling from grace. The second trilogy was about how do you come back from being so low, you know. And then the sequel trilogy was going to be about, let's go back to the origins, let's go to the origins and figure out where everything went wrong, and how everything can become better, you know. I mean, I'm kind of just simplifying it in my own head as I say it, but I think that would have been a much more interesting trilogy. I think, you know, it's just a mess, and it's done. This is the worst part, that it's done. Like, these are the 3 movies that finished the Skywalker Saga, the Star Wars saga. And the other thing too, calling it the Skywalker Saga is a little bit misleading in a way, because it wasn't really about the Skywalker Saga. The way you ended it, it's basically it became the Palpatine saga, and that was a little bit of a slap in the face. It's the Star Wars saga. So, you know, this whole thing about the Skywalker Saga, no, the Skywalker Saga ended when Luke turned Vader over to the light, defeated Palpatine, and brought balance to the Force. Father, son, bringing balance to the Force, and now the future is bright for a new republic, a new era of peace, and continuing adventures of Luke Skywalker as he rebuilds the Jedi. You know, the sequel trilogy, all it did was kind of just trampled on all that, which is just a shame. It's just a shame. Anyway, this episode really wasn't going to be about me talking about the Rise of Skywalker, but it kind of turned into that. I wanted to touch on some other news that came up, so I'll just do that now. But before I do, let me know in the comments below, or, you know, let me know what do you think about the Rise of Skywalker? I mean, am I crazy? Because even if you love the Rise of Skywalker, and even if you love this sequel trilogy, if this is like your favorite trilogy, that's perfectly fine. But you have to admit, comparing them to the original trilogy and even to the prequel trilogy, like this trilogy was just all over the place. You know, it's just so convoluted. You know, it's just heartbreaking. It's just so heartbreaking. But that's the Rise of Skywalker, and it's all done now. Now our hope is that moving forward, you know, we're going to get some great content on Disney Plus. We're going to get season 2 of The Mandalorian in October, as has been reported, and the Kenobi series is going to start filming, I think, like either later this year or early next year. So we'll have the Kenobi series definitely in 2021, which, you know what, we can wait. Do it right. We'll wait. You know, do it right. And what else? We got Clone Wars coming out in a few weeks, which is super exciting. I've not finished my rewatch of the Clone Wars. Well, I mean, I shouldn't even say rewatch, because when it first aired, I would watch it here and there, you know, but it was so long ago that it's all over the place in my brain. And I didn't really watch the last few the last season, basically. I didn't even watch at all. So I'm looking forward to kind of like catching up, finishing that up, and seeing how they close out the Clone Wars. Also, Star Wars Resistance has been kind of like the little sleeper hit. I think it's a really fascinating show. It's a little bit of a slow burn in season 1, but then it definitely picks up steam towards the end of season 1, and now this season 2, which it's the final season. It's only a 2-season thing. I love how it just connects perfectly. It's connecting with the events of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, which kind of makes sense, you know, season 1, season 2, and that's it. And The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi basically tie into each other seamlessly as well, because they, you know, they take place right after another. So we have that. We have the Cassian Andor series that I think is going to probably end up coming out before Kenobi. I'm not sure. You know, that's exciting. We got, you know, Celebration coming up this summer. That's exciting as well, in Anaheim, California. And, you know, I think we're in a good place as far as moving on in a world where Star Wars is still around and Star Wars is still big. And lastly, I wanted to touch on another type of Star Wars content, which just came out of the blue, is now Hasbro announced they're releasing that troop transport. I'll put it right here. That thing looks amazing. This troop transport is part of like the Vintage Collection toy line. It's like a complete overhaul of the original troop transport, which was a toy that was not in the movies, but they made it into a toy just so they can have toys in, you know, when in the vintage, the early line, you know, back in the 80s or late 70s, early 80s. And then in 2015, it appeared on the Star Wars Rebels animated show. And then this toy was released, which was the Star Wars Rebels version of it, which I had the chance to buy it and I missed out. And now they're so hard to find. I would love to have one of these, because I really don't want the vintage one. I'd rather have this one, because it's something that we can still play with. The original one had electronics, which is kind of cool, and then they released one without, and then this one doesn't have any electronics. But now with the Vintage Collection one, this thing is just amazing. It looks so cool. The detail inside, I'll cut to some shots if you're watching this of what it looks like inside. Okay, so for those of you watching this on YouTube, you might notice that the shot completely changed. I'm dressed a little bit different, and because it is different, it's the next day. The battery actually died on me right in the middle of recording. So what I need to do is make sure I have a cable running to the charging port in my car, so that I can just run off the power and not rely on the battery. So anyway, as I was saying, so I think it's really cool that Hasbro, I guess, you know, they've decided to really take advantage and cash in on the fact that The Mandalorian was such a hit. I mean, I think pound for pound, The Mandalorian is more popular right now than Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. You know, I think The Rise of Skywalker was kind of like the dessert that, you know, it's not good for you, but you just can't help yourself after the delicious, nutritious meal that you just had, the big juicy steak that you just had, which was the 8 episodes of The Mandalorian. So Hasbro knows this. They're cashing in on it. They've already made the Vintage Collection line ATST from The Mandalorian, one of the episodes, and that's a Best Buy exclusive, which I really want to pick up at some point. And now they've done it again. They went back to that well, because they know that it's going to be profitable, and now they're accepting pre-orders for the Imperial troop transport that we saw in the final episode of season 1, which I think was amazing to see it. I mean, to see it in live action form and to see like aesthetically and just how it functions, to see like all these stormtroopers like pop out of it and all these little side doors come out. I mean, I think that was awesome. To think that a toy that was basically invented by Kenner, inspired by the movie but never was in the movie, has now made its way into a live action Star Wars property. And not only that, is now there's an updated toy of it. So I just think that's awesome. It looks amazing. Again, the pictures speak for themselves. And I definitely, like I said before, it's a little bit overpriced at $69. I think like $70 for literally like a plastic toy truck is a little bit outrageous. But again, you know, they put it in the vintage collection box, and it's supposed to make all of us fanboys go crazy because we want to relive our childhood and we remember how awesome all those toys looked in those vintage boxes. And so they're betting on that, and they're gonna succeed. However, here's the thing: you're gonna get a lot of people that are gonna pre-order it. You're gonna get a lot of people that are gonna buy it. But for people like me, I like to take a little chance, and I like to just kind of like play the long game with a lot of these toys. And I know that eventually they're gonna mass produce this thing, and eventually they're gonna start to mark them down. Stores are gonna start to mark them down, whether it's at Best Buy, whether it becomes a Target exclusive, or it becomes a Walmart exclusive, or maybe it's not an exclusive and it'll be available in all these stores. It eventually will be marked down, and definitely, like, even on Amazon, sometimes Amazon marks them down. So I like to play the long game with these things, because I'm not gonna go out and spend $70 on a toy that, even though it's amazing and I love, you know, it's one of those toys where you're gonna get like a big portion of the fans that buy it that are just like not even gonna open it. They're just gonna leave it sealed in the box because it's just beautiful artwork. And you know, there's this thing amongst toy fans and Star Wars fans and vintage toy fans where we salivate over the idea of a toy being sealed in a box, and us kind of being smart enough to keep it sealed in the box because someday the thing is going to be worth thousands of dollars. And I'll be the first to admit I fall for that all the time, that mentality. I did it as a teenager and in my 20s, because I started buying up the Power of the Force 2 stuff and the Episode 1 Phantom Menace toys, and since then I've been buying toys, and I have literally like bins of toys in my attic that are unopened. But you know, to some degree, I kind of have this, I kind of justified in my head, because now that I have 3 small boys and my younger brother who has 3 kids of his own, I just have this dream of, you know, once I have like my quote unquote forever house, and I can have a kind of like an office room or maybe like a corner in the basement where I can display all of the Star Wars treasures that I have, then I would definitely love to be able to open a lot of these things up and display them and play with them with my sons, hopefully sooner than later, because, you know, they're getting older and pretty soon they're not going to want to play with this stuff. Hopefully I've taught them well, and as Jedi Toy Masters, they will always, no matter how old they get, not be too old to play with Star Wars toys. So we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you posted on that one. But yeah, I'm gonna play the long game with this thing. It looks amazing. It looks awesome. Now, the long game has failed me in the past because I missed out on buying, like I said before, the previous incarnation of the Troop Transport, which came out in 2015, because the Troop Transport appeared in Star Wars Rebels, the animated show. So it was really cool seeing it on that show, and you know, the toy came out and I saw it in stores. I thought it was awesome, and then once it wasn't in stores anymore, then I started seeing it online, and I remember having a couple of them on eBay in my favorites, and they were like, you know, comparatively to what their people are asking for them now, there's not that many online anymore, and those that are online are trying to get like $100 for them sealed. And I just remember, it was just maybe like 2 years ago that you could still get them on eBay for like 20, 30 bucks. And I totally dropped the ball and I didn't pick one up, and now I'm regretting it. And at this point, I would settle for a loose one. I just really think it's a cool toy. I have all of the other Star Wars Rebels line toys that came out, like the A-Wing with Hera, and the other incarnation of the AT-ST that appeared on that show, and the Phantom Shuttle. So I definitely really wish I had gotten my hands on that. So, you know, playing the long game, there's a little bit of risk, but there's risk with anything. And I'd rather pay what I think is fair for a toy. You know what I mean? Like, if it's a toy that is more like a collector's item, like, you know, like a vintage, a mint vintage Boba Fett that fires the rocket, you know, then yeah, I can totally see you know, whoever owns one of those, you know, trying to get as much as possible for it, because the demand is really high on a toy that's that rare, that's not going to be played with. It's going to be displayed as a centerpiece, perhaps, to a Star Wars shrine. But some toys, I think, are just overpriced for no reason, and it's not fair to those that really just want to be able to buy the toys to play with, to, you know. And that's kind of like where I'm at. Like, I have 3 young sons that, you know, I want to sit down on the carpet and play Star Wars, and like that's what Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau did with The Mandalorian. I mean, that show is basically them, you know, breaking open a box of Star Wars toys, you know, scattering them on the floor and playing with them. So anyway, that's all I got for today. I kind of gave you my Rise of Skywalker rant again, and cool news, we're getting some more vintage toys from Hasbro. Vintage toy line, I should say, from Hasbro. Also, keep on the lookout, because at some point this year, the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back toys will start to kind of be released little by little. I already saw this image for the Imperial probe droid, I think that was in the Empire Strikes Back, in the first scenes of Empire Strikes Back. So they're out there, they're going to start to come out, and it's going to be exciting, because Empire Strikes Back is my favorite Star Wars movie of all time, and I'm going to be a sucker and probably try to buy everything that is 40th anniversary Empire Strikes Back, with the exception of maybe commemorative plates. I'm not really into those. So anyway, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Check out our previous episodes and some of our other episodes on our YouTube channel right here at Jedi Toy Masters. If you're listening to this in podcast form, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, and also give us a cool, gnarly review on iTunes, and you know, let spread the word about our humble little podcast where we sit. Basically, I sit in my car and I talk about Star Wars. I hope to have more guests in 2020, and as you saw in some previous episodes, I had my good friend JC, and as we figure out how to do it properly, and maybe even have somebody physically sitting next to me, but also remotely do some interviews, we'll bring that to you in 2020. So again, thank you for listening, and as always, may the Force be with you.